Today, I spend the hour with Vivek Prasannan, engineer by trade, philosopher by nature, and executive director of a decentralized exchange by day. It was in 2013, during his computer engineering career, when he discovered the Satoshi white paper and immediately understood the vision of a peer to peer decentralized money system. After that, he became interwoven with the Bitcoin community and attended early Bitcoin conferences, where he became familiar with the Bitcoin and blockchain thought leaders. But it is his unique understanding of the philosophy and thinking that shaped decentralized finance that makes him fit to lead the build of what will be one of the largest decentralized crypto exchanges built for the Polkadot ecosystem, Polkadex. I'm very pleased to have him on the show today, Vivek Prasannan. Welcome to the DYOR Crypto Founders Report, where we speak to the leaders, pioneers, and inventors of the blockchain and crypto space. I'm Mostafa, the founder of DYOR Crypto, and if you're looking for someone to help you navigate and research the world of blockchain and crypto, then you've come to the right place. Follow now on YouTube, Twitter, and DYOR-crypto.com so you don't miss any of the fascinating guests that come on our show. Also, remember to sign up for show notes, link in the description, as well as keep notifications on YouTube so that you know when we're running contests and sweepstakes. Welcome back to the DYOR Crypto Founders Report. Today, our guest is early Bitcoin adopter, computer engineer by trade, and executive director of Polkadex, Vivek Prasannan. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mostafa, for having me here.
Glad to have you. So, Vivek, can you tell us the story of when you first discovered cryptocurrency and blockchain?
Yeah, of course. So it's an interesting story because it goes back to 2013. That's like 8 years ago. And I was actually coming out of a transition in my consulting service life, where a major portion of my consulting business was sold off, and I was looking for new opportunities because of various reasons. Part of that was due to some of the personal things I was going through. I was looking to change my, pathway in consulting into finding something new. I was researching on new topics, and then I came across. Luckily, it was exactly the same time the Bitcoin and the ecosystem was trying to gather some sort of attention among the engineering or geeks, I would say. And so I got to know about this forum, bitcointalk.org. It was referred by a friend of mine who told me on our phone conversation, like we used to have this frequent conversations regarding technology, where I really like his, he's somebody who actually tried to, create his own company and sold it for a good sum back in college days, right? So he's really smart. So we have this regular conversation, about technology and the new gigs that happen in the space. So he mentioned to me about this, new stuff, and then I logged into bitcointalk.org, and that's the first time I actually got to know what this is about. So I was really fascinated by the fact that there's a lot of frenzy around it, and people are trading. And even then, back then, it was like $100, So it really caught my attention. And then I started looking into what it is, and then tried to get hold of the white paper. And then I figured, okay, I tried to acquire some Bitcoin. And back then, there were no really known exchanges, or it was not even regulated. Forget about it. It's like a completely anonymous system. No KYC, nothing. So you could just see how it looks like. So there was, so basically that's when I first tried to put my hands around it and see how this looks like. And out of curiosity, I tried to acquire some mining boards. Like it was like 44 gigahash mining boards, and tried to plug that. It came as like the what do you say, like electronic circuits. So you just have to have a parallel connection and then add up the whole mining power. And I still remember putting that in the corner of my office, and nobody knew exactly what I was doing because everybody's curious, like, what does this guy have to? Because I had to uh, put it together using PVC pipes, and it was simple curiosity that drew me towards knowing what it is, right? So, and then you could connect it to the mining pool, and then you learned about mining pool, how that works, and then about the algorithm behind Bitcoin. So everything was really fascinating back then because I knew that it was completely new to, because most people didn't know what's happening, and the conversations in Bitcoin talk were completely uh, really interesting those days. So um, that's my first dabble with the whole system. Yep. And then after some time, difficulty increased, and then I tried to bring up, I tried to upgrade that because there was something called KNC Miner back then. It was a Swedish company. I don't think it's there anymore. So I think I tried to do it to 1 terahash, and then I just dropped it. So because it's something which I could afford to, uh, you know, experiment within my office space in a corner of my, where I had this router and all this set up, so I could just sweetly put it over there and see how things work. So that's when I started. That is in 2013, I believe.
So your first experience with
August.
Bitcoin was actually you were mining it. You weren't buying it.
Exactly.
Oh,
I
okay.
wasn't buying it. I mined it and
Yeah.
tried it out myself. Yes,
That's really interesting. So did you
because
at some
I'm a
point?
person who like to.
Mhm.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I generally like to figure things out myself. That sort of a person rather than that's just by reading. I like to see and feel how things work.
Mhm.
So that's what the inspiration behind that. Yeah.
So you learned about the Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin by doing what? Reading the Bitcoin.org, and did you pick up the Satoshi white paper at some point?
Yep.
Hmm.
Of course. Yeah. That's what actually made me, like everybody else, because I've been. If you look at most of these influencers in that period, right, when Andreas started talking about it, he's somebody who's actually influenced my early years in trying to learn and the philosophy behind Bitcoin. So people speak about this white paper, but I wasn't really, um, somebody with that engineer skill to probably understand the repercussions of trust as I see today. But back then, I would say Andreas had a lot of influence on me, like in trying to learn more about the philosophy. And then I looked at the way how um, money is expressed in terms of the value that we have today, and how the idea of trust can be created in a decentralized way. So all of that philosophical idea was definitely came through reading and watching the stories that I listened to, and definitely that had a lot of influence. So it wasn't like, originally I just read the white paper and then I just figured, okay, everything came to my head. No, I was deeply influenced by many people who authored, and I was a regular visitor to all these websites. I think even back then there were a lot of the similar ones like Cointelegraph. We had CoinDesk, I believe, and then so many of them even back then. So I used to be regularly reading about it, and you know uh, fascinated by everything in it, because every other day something changes. And in 2013 itself, a big hack happened in with empty gox, right? So there are lot of news about it, and people losing money. There's a lot of frenzy, and then all of these actually make you think. As if you're generally curious, I'm not saying you should be really, if you're generally curious and you have a basic engineering mindset, it's rather very easy to start thinking about, okay, what's going wrong here, right? And there's something new, and it had these properties, and what is wrong and how we can fix it. So that's the general curiosity which I had and which I harbored right from the beginning in this space. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Well, what exactly about Bitcoin, blockchain, cryptocurrency was the one thing that fascinated you the most encourage you to go all in on it and start experimenting with it? What was one idea or one concept about it that you thought was the most powerful?
Of course, decentralized and peer-to-peer cash, right? So you're basically for the first time, that's when you start reading, you realize that nobody is able to create that. And then you come across the Byzantine problem. It was a problem that's been puzzling the engineers for so long. Then I just drew my computer networks textbook from my engineering days. Then you start reading more back, you go back in time, and then you see, actually, when you learn these things in college, you really don't relate to the actual practicality of it, right? So when you come across problems in life, then you start thinking, hey, okay, this is something of a problem, and this is the first time it could actually be resolved in a decentralized environment. And that itself is so exciting for somebody who's been through that. But when you're learning for exam, you don't care. But when you really think about it, it's got larger repercussions in society. And the fact that it is something fairly new, which is published only like 5 years ago, and where the world could go from there is something which I think I could. So wherever we are today, I think it was easily, if you're really into that space, you knew exactly where it was heading to.
Mhm.
It was a force that could have not been stopped, even from then.
Wow.
It was, if you really understood the technology, I think it was very clear from the beginning for me.
Did you believe that it was a force that could not be stopped at that time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I tried to convey this to a few of my friends, but none of them bought it, because I really felt the value that is generated from the truth and the trust that is built by a decentralized, consensus network. It is, the value is inherent in that. You don't have to really show that it has got value, because people uh, attribute value to a source of truth or source of trust. So that is something which really, because it's been difficult, because until then it has never been possible to have a decentralized network of computers to actually have a consensus together and distribute it across the internet, right? So you're basically creating a rudimentary form of AI, right? You're basically getting all these, decentralized network of computers to take a decision together at the same time, and not allowing a single party or somebody to actually jeopardize that, which is humongously, it's if you really believe in, I mean, if you understand what's going on, I don't think you should really be fretting why this thing has value. I mean, I don't know, it's just the economics problem, but if you come from the engineering side, it's very, very clear that why it has value is very, very simple, because it's creating a decentralized source of truth.
Mhm. So from the very, very beginning, you really understood it and you really believed in it. What did you think?
Absolutely.
What did you think at that time? What was going on in your mind about what was going to happen in the future? Did you have any sort of, what were you predicting at that time was going to happen in the future? And did it actually happen the way that you predicted it?
Well, I think the predictions which I made was in line with whatever I was reading and absorbing at that time,
Mhm.
and which is really something which I agreed to, right? You follow certain, people patterns which you believe in, and then you come to realize that your discussions within your mind reflects with what they are trying to say, and then you correlate that decisions in your mind with what people are saying, right? So I was really not bothered by the noise. So I was really, it is very clear that right from the beginning that this is something which can actually replace the middle layer of decision making in many situations, and that can actually allow the world to have peer-to-peer transactions
Mhm.
by eliminating people who actually stood in the middle for allowing these transactions to happen, because these this data in itself, the source of data, cannot agree on a consensus by themselves. So since they cannot agree on a consensus by themselves, you're depending on a third party. And the fact that here you have programmable layer, which is actually able to take that decision for you, you're basically, removing that layer.
Mm-hmm.
So straight away it goes to the banking, teller relationships, right? Account keeping, where you need an accountant to actually trust when two parties transact. So right from there, the technology is there. So it wasn't really hard to imagine what the world will look like when you have a technology available like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think not just me, I think people in that space who are, I'm not a maximalist by in any way with Bitcoin. I just say that, why it has values because of this. I'm not saying that it's going to last or what's going to be in terms of, but the technology behind that could definitely allow people to make these peer-to-peer transactions possible by in any form. It needn't be financial transactions. It could be other decision-making areas, right? Where you feed in data and then you can have that data to be accepted by the other person by trusting this consensus layer.
Mm-hmm. So
So that's really fascinating.
did you continue mining for how long did you continue mining Bitcoin after you started?
Hardly for maybe the moment the 1 terahash thing came, I could do it for a month. That's it.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened?
Yeah,
Did you switch to
it's just
purchasing?
no. I didn't switch to purchasing. First of all, I think it became too expensive to purchase for the kind of dabbling I was doing with all this, because I burned some, like not a lot of money, but just something that justified my curiosity. I didn't want to spend too much money on that because I was trying to see if there was any way I can actually try to utilize in my um, primary consulting business I had, right? To see if I could generate new areas of opportunity. But then, even though it was a beginning, then I couldn't go further because of the regulatory landscape. And I soon realized that it is something of a gray area in terms of financial transactions, especially in India. And soon we could see that there was bolder engineers than me, fresh graduates who tried to come up with these ATMs in, I think that was in 2014, I believe, or 15. Someone in India in Bangalore, he tried to set up a ATM, Bitcoin ATM, and he was arrested.
Ooh.
And the cops didn't know why he's getting arrested. And by the time he's taken and then he's been questioned, and finally nothing could be charged and he was allowed to leave. So there was a lot of gray area, and with the kind of dependency I had on the basic software market and the system I depended on, I simply couldn't take steps to do anything openly,
Mm-hmm.
right? In terms of commercializing it. So anything that I did was purely out of my curiosity and interest in a personal level. That's it. So that's why even the mining activity and all of that was simply out of my personal interest. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
not it was not something. It didn't have any commercial interest behind it.
Mm-hmm. When did regulatory concerns start to creep up on you? Or if any?
It was, I think, by the time, first of all, mining became extremely harder and harder. And I realized that rather than pay and get a mining machine and use its life cycle, you could as well buy and then hold, and you just end up making the same. So it's basically the investment that you make is probably almost the same as what you're going to spend, right?
Mm-hmm.
For a machine, right?
Yeah.
So there were so many tools that actually allowed you predictions, which gives you really exciting figures when you put the numbers in that, okay, you invest this amount, it gives you this amount. If you buy a miner with 1 terahash, you mine it for this month, but it just doesn't work because it was just going exponentially up, that it wasn't commercially viable for individuals to actually make a really profitable bet on it. And that phase soon happened, I think, after the I think Antminer or somebody just came up with a technology which was much more yeah, the basic. I think people initially try with the graphics card, and then just moved on to specialized CPUs for this. So from that point onwards, and there's a curious story where I tried to see if I could come up with manufacturing. I tried to see if I could manufacture a mining machine. When I first saw it, with the 45 gigahash mining machine, I thought it's something, because I have my college where I did my degree, right? So they have a very good VLSI lab. So I went and visited the faculty, and I said, I just want to try it. I have this blueprint. See if we could just do it with an R&D with our own students, right? So I tried to dabble a little bit, but it took me 1 month, but that 1 month was enough for me to realize that this is going completely out of my hands without serious money, right? It's completely out of anybody's realm of hobby, or what you say out of interest, what you could do. This was it. You simply cannot cope up with manufacturing and scaling and those stuff. Yeah, I think a bunch of people came out of Samsung. That's what I heard. And then they just brought it up like terahash, and then soon it became 10 terahash. Then it was no looking back. You simply couldn't do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So what happened? What happened after that? Did you gain interest in, when did Ethereum come out, and what happened when that came out?
Big believer. I think I was really following it, and Ethereum came in 15. I read about Vitalik and all this group of students who actually tried to publish it. I was really following that, and yes, I think I told about that to a couple of my friends too. I remember about Ethereum, and I told that this is going to be really interesting because you could have much more programmability. And some of the complaints that people had was that Bitcoin was not too easy to program back then, and there was a lot of betting algorithms people are trying to create this betting and gaming companies that were trying to come up with these things. So they were shifting towards Ethereum, and that's when I tried to learn, okay, this is something which is more interesting, right? And yeah, so everybody knew that Ethereum was going to be big. There was no doubt about it. I still remember the first it just got published, and yeah, I think it was a no-brainer back
Yeah.
then.
Did you start mining that, or
No, I didn't mine.
okay.
No.
Yeah.
I never mined anything other than Bitcoin at the
Other than
initial
Bitcoin.
time. Yeah.
And so did you start investing in Ethereum when you first saw it too? Did you believe in that vision as much as you did in the, well, I guess the whole decentralization, the concept of decentralization?
Absolutely. I think I believed in that, and it just not in the sense that as a big investment or anything, but yes,
yeah,
I was in it. Yeah.
I understood. Yeah, got you. So, how did you transition from this being a little bit of a hobby to taking this into making this part of your full-time career?
A full-time career is very recent. I was always trying to do something in it at all times in parallel to my primary business, right? So from 2015 and 14, that's when I started my second startup. That was about payment gateway, which is again inspired by something which of a difficulty which I faced with my because online payments were not very big in India back then. All of these big players came in 1 year after I launched my second startup, which is like nothing but a payment system for education institutions, right? So that was my second startup, and by the time I came out of it, there was a notice by the government about making all the the secondary education schools, all the payments should be made online. So there was an influx of big corporates. That's the time I decided to leave that company and allowed my other partners to take it, because they had another vision of retaining the ERP component around it and building something very schools related, which I didn't believe in. So that was between 2015 and 17. And by the time it was 18, I was transitioning from that startup towards, again, pumping more money into the space itself. That's when I really got serious about the DEX space, I mean, decentralized exchange idea, which is something which, if you're in this space, if you know that even from 2014 onwards, 13, even the transactions which I try to do, it's always like for a technology which enabled peer-to-peer exchange of value, you needed a middleman to settle it, because you know that once you give Bitcoin or you just send something, you basically do not get it back, right? So the transactions always had this counterparty risk, who will do first kind of thing, right? So there were people in the forum which stood as, I mean, reputed people. One of them was later on became the CTO of one of the exchanges in India. And so he was he was the escrow for that. So I knew that everybody knew that, like, you need somebody to ensure that transaction goes through fine, there was no fraud. So even back then, there were a lot of talk about building a decentralized peer-to-peer mechanism, which would actually collateralize a value, which will allow you to lock this transaction in a blockchain and then have the other person release that to you. So one of them happened to be BitShares, which came to my attention. I'm not saying there weren't others, but BitShares was one of them. It was published way back, I think, on the similar times as Ethereum came in, I think. So that's, and then I went behind that. I thought it was great because I installed it. I found it interesting, and it was based on graphene, and I ran it. I tried to dabble with it. So everything looked great, and the new the consensus mechanism and pause, because Bitcoin was facing a lot of flack even back then about the electricity consumption. So this proof of stake system was something which was kind of getting momentum back then. And I started reading about proof of stake, and then you had this BitShares, which was the first time. I think they claim to be the first to give distributed POS, not nominated, distributed POS. So that's when I started, trying to trade in those decentralized exchanges, which allowed you to, you're necessarily not giving control to the other person, right? And then you realize, okay, this is not going to work because it's too slow. But back, even 3 seconds back then was really good, because you just could get the work done compared to a peer-to-peer system. Like, there were so many systems available, right? Back then, even local Bitcoins was been around for a long time now. So, but compared to that, if you have an order book and if just 3 second block time, who cares? I mean, still you have asset control. So I think the real geeks who understood what is going on would have preferred to go there and, exchange if you wanted to, or, dabble with it. So I always preferred to, try these kind of exchanges. So I knew exactly what was wrong with it. And then everybody knew what was wrong, but it's really wasn't possible to have any sort of on-chain consensus that would actually increase the speed. So just left it there. And so I wanted to see if we could have a layer 2 mechanism. I didn't name it layer 2, because people were having this idea back then, I don't know who coined the term layer 2, but the idea was almost similar to the layer 2 solutions that we have today, like to have some sort of control over these assets in a separate layer where you could settle that faster with a centralized operator with some sort of a smart contract, and then settle it back into the system. And then that was an idea which I attempted with BitShares through a improvement protocol. And I was helped by a company in Amsterdam. It was part of the BitFest 2018. I was in Amsterdam. So I'm pretty sure there were a couple of engineers which I worked with. And the vested wallet concept, I don't know if they finally merged it. It should have been. I think it's a very nice concept. I think if BitShares could adopt that and come up with similar systems, it would have been really good for the industry. But I don't think anybody really was able to make it happen there. I don't know exactly what happened, but the reason I pulled out of that project was mostly due to first reason, they had this very weird idea of having these centralized gateways which issued these assets on chain. So you have to depend on them, or you have to get the license to be a centralized gateway. So for me, it was like kind of, from my investment capacity, it was not really in the realm of what I could do. So I had to depend on somebody. So then I thought, okay, the whole idea was to not have that risk on my side, right? The whole idea is to have peer-to-peer asset management. So if I'm taking the risk of creating a gateway where I collateralize the assets and issue it with a license, then what's the difference? It's just like being in another centralized exchange. So so that was not really interesting for me. And the other thing is, the interface that BitShares had was not as so asynchronous as what you have in Substrate right now. It's very tightly coupled. So even if you come up with a very good interface and have a nice thing to start off, you have to keep going behind and upgrade it to make sure that your systems are secure. And I think there was a company which tried to do that. I don't know what happened. I simply lost touch. I don't know how far he was able to keep going with that. And because he was fed up of getting these proposals approved in BitShares, I think he just started another chain and forked BitShares and started his own stuff. How far he succeeded, I don't know, because it's very true. It's creating a blockchain is easy, but to secure it and decentralize it is going to take some real news value to have people join you. It's like politics. You're saying that you're going to offer you this and that, you have to come and join my dream. It's kind of getting people to involve, and that's only then you become secure, right? So that's been the problem there. So and the icing on the cake was the open ledger hack. Then I thought, okay, I think I need to sit back and just cool it off before I try it again. Yeah, so that's when I stopped at it. That was about 2019. And
I see. So can you tell us what, in your own words, what is decentralized finance? What does it mean to you?
I think decentralized finance is anything to do with allowing decentralized consensus layer to actually replace many of the central banking layer that you see today now, right? In terms of lending, borrowing, and any of the financial instruments that you see today is issued by centralized institutions. So all of these can be automated in this consensus layer of computers. Simple as that. So people are looking at the trust model rather than the bank promising you, okay, I'll give you this percentage, I'll give you. They can just read the code and just invest. They know what's going on. Yeah. So that's the basic idea. And I think people have started with this basic, lending and borrowing model where you have this, the liquidity mining thing, right? You basically earn interest over your asset. So I think,
in your opinion, what's wrong with the centralized model that exists?
I would say there's nothing inherently wrong with a centralized solution as long as the trusted party is honest. There's nothing wrong with the system even now, right? As long as the trusted party is honest, everything is in a perfect world should work just fine. And that's been the problem with democracies, right? You are basically creating trusted party through consensus. The problem with that is the time for which they are in power is like 5 years in constitutions, that you elect them for 5 years.
Mhm.
And you expect them to be honest, and everything is fine if they're honest, and if they do a good job, it's for the benefit of everybody. It's like for the people, by the people, right? So everything is fine. But if there is an honest party, you simply cannot know until a damage has been done, right?
Mhm.
So when you compare that to incidences that happened over the years, with the 2008 financial crash, with everything that together. So probably that's why something or somebody that prompted them to come up with something of they probably thought about it philosophically, and came up with an idea which could be beneficial. So it's a way of natural evolution, where certain forces will actually help the other side to rebel against it, and then you try to reach a harmony where everybody agrees, okay, now this is the new realm, right? So it's a natural progression of how people view and adapt. So there's nothing wrong with the system in a centralized institution if it is a completely honest system, no problem. So when you don't have the luxury to trust this central layer, that's where trustless systems become valuable, where you don't really have to trust anybody, right? So that's what these the layer promises you, right? If you're promised that you will get X% from the X% return from this particular token or whatever it is, it's programmed, you can read it, and nobody's going to change that. But as far as a financial institution is concerned, it has to do with how he's going to perform, or it has to do with how he's going to utilize that money and how he's going to come up with and creating value in it. But in this case, you know where the value is coming from. The value is derived from the security of the blockchain. That is, you basically buy value to Bitcoin because it's used for securing that network, right? So that's the value behind it. So you know where the value comes from, and you know exactly how much is going to come. So there's a lot of predictability, and you do not have to trust anybody. So miners know that, okay, in 10 minutes, I'm going to get rewarded with X Bitcoins. It just keeps happening. Nobody can, control that. Even war cannot control it. Nothing can control it. So that's like, you don't have to trust anybody. You just trusting the network.
Interesting. I haven't heard it put that way. So the trustlessness of it is is a big value.
Enormous value. I think people are slowly starting to realize that how valuable it is not to have to trust something to perform a transaction. Even the due diligence factor of any transaction that you do, right, is because you don't trust the other party. You have to do DD on anything. Any transactions we make, we do on a regular basis. It's something of a very simple thing that we do, right? It's expensive, it's time consuming, and it is the part and parcel of any financial transaction that we have today. And I'm not saying that we are ready to an extent where everything can be engineered on chain, or everything and anything can happen on chain. No, but the beginning of progression of removing that trust layer has already happened. Now there's no way going back. Okay, so engineers will keep dabbling with these challenges, and they will come up with solutions, and they will keep on going until it is slowly. So whatever advance you have made, you cannot take it back because it's technology. So you can curb it with regulations, you can curb it with any sort of external pressure, but it can be regulated so much as to the point where it do not directly harm the society. Otherwise, so it's basically kind of a how you handle fire, right? You can't put fire in your pocket. You have to hold it carefully and walk. when you have a knife, you have to hold it carefully and use it properly. You can't simply just do like this, then it'll cut you all over, right? So basically all of these powerful tools that are being built have its own problems if not directed in the right way. So that's the responsibility of legislatures, people in power who should responsibly allow these technologies to flourish and get absorbed into the society that we have today. It shouldn't be like, oh, you see fire and say, hey, put down that fire. We don't want to use fire anymore. No, fire is there. It's already been found out now. There's no way that you can actually put it down. Somebody else will create it, right? So you just have to have a system, and that's their job, and they have to do it. And if they don't do it, they will be forced to do it at some point. So that is something that people need to realize, then just close their eyes and think, okay, you can just say that fire don't exist. And anybody who goes near fire should be put in jail, those kind of tricks. It just doesn't work in the long run.
Yeah, I see. There's been a lot of regulatory scares, I would say, over the years. What regulation do you think will come to DeFi in the near future?
Well, for that, to be frank, I'm not a social expert, or in terms of how it should be and what is the right fit for the society. I'm not the one to comment on that. I may have my own personal opinion.
Well, sure. Actually, why don't you elaborate on your opinion? How should DeFi be regulated, in your opinion?
In its truest sense, it should never be regulated. Okay, it should never be regulated because it's supposed to be not regulated. So anything that is regulated is not truly decentralized. I buy that. I completely understand. But you have to be practical here when you innovate and try to do things which are not available. So the responsibility as an engineer or as a responsible citizen is that, you try to push the limits, and at least we expect the legislatures to allow us to push the limit and show what is possible. And then, see how we can actually adapt that to the society. It's something of a question of debate, actually, right? So for me, I have a different take on privacy. It may not be completely in line with somebody who is on the other side of it, but I completely respect that view. It's not that I'm saying that I am the only right. They are right as well. But for me, I believe that as a civilization, the way we have progressed, there is a need for governance, right? Otherwise, we cannot live in the comfort that we are having today, right? We are able to, what is the promise of the government? At least, they promise to protect your wealth, health, and they promise to do that. That's how they are elected to power, with certain agreed terms and law that is around. That's how a society is, right? They mutually agree to these rules, and I believe that taking that out is not progress, right? So that's why, for me, I think if a harm has been done, or if somebody is in harm, and if there has been a crime, which means is a translation of not agreeing to these rules, right? Criminality, or when a crime is performed when you're actually breaking that law. So when that happens, there is no way you should allow somebody to be hiding behind the veil of anonymity. Letting somebody do that is not right for the progress of the way we are moving forward, right? So I don't believe in that. So that's why I don't really believe in. I mean, it's really possible with the technology available, but I think that's why I wanted to refer to what you and Bennett told that day about Web3 when he spoke about it. There's a lot of responsibility in the hands of people who are building these tools, right? So you have to be really careful with what you're building. It's understandable, but at the same time, you have to be, you have to be understanding of these engineers who try to do these things, right? They're not really thinking of, okay, I want to break the rule by deliberately, I want to do this. No, nobody's trying to do that. They're trying to create certain things and push it to certain levels, which is interesting, which never existed before, which makes things much more easier for a certain way and solve some of these problems. And so they should be given the luxury to innovate without prohibiting them too much, which I think countries like Singapore are leading the way in, right? So that's the kind of approach that people in this space should do. Yeah, so that's my take on privacy.
Yeah.
I think that you have a right to be anonymous until something goes wrong. So if something is wrong, there should be a way to prevent or bring that person to justice. That justice could be anything. I'm not a proponent of what kind of justice, but there should be a way to track down and bring people, make people accountable, because that's the only way you can function as a civilized society, at least in my opinion.
There needs to be accountability.
Yep. But until that point, there's no point surveilling everybody and thinking that everybody are trying to cheat, or everybody in the system is a fraud. That's the easiest way out, right? If you think that everybody is a criminal, you always have a chance to get hold of the criminal, right? You're filtering them and making them grinding them through this whole process, but that's making life difficult, and it is not really a good progress, I would say. See, there should be. That's why privacy is very important, and in this space, I think, can contribute a lot towards that by actually building tools which can actually fit into the regulatory system. Because at the end of the day, what do you want? You want people to be accountable for what they're doing as an adult. But as an adult, you don't expect everybody to check on where you're going, what you're doing, and what you're purchasing, what you're doing. He's supposed to know I remember my dad say, okay, you're 18 now you're under the rules and law of the country, right? It's your responsibility. You can't go to the court and say that, okay, I didn't know that this law existed. When you're a kid, you can say that. But by default, you're expected to know these rules, isn't it?
Yes.
So you don't really have to think that, okay, an adult is going to perform a crime because he's using fire, he's using a knife, he's using a gun, or he's using a blockchain, or he's using Bitcoin, for that matter. Any technology for that matter. But if something goes wrong, there has to be tools developed to actually go behind it.
Interesting.
That's what I think.
Are there being what tools are being developed right now that are going in that direction, if any?
I don't think I am really focused on that right now.
Okay.
I'm focused on the more simpler problems. So,
so let's talk about I read a piece of yours on your blog, which I'll link because the piece is really well written and very, very insightful. I'm going to quote a piece here from your blog. As much as we know the importance of having democratically elected committees run the network protocol, it is equally important to realize that committees cannot run businesses effectively. Only professionals commensurately driven by their contribution. Then you went on to write, it is one reason why many decentralized protocols cannot move fast and innovate further at a pace expected with their invention. They are caught up in large, opinionated environments. Without even knowing they are cutting the same branch of the tree, they rest. They are inflexible, large communities looking for a leader to innovate. They are probably the victim of one of the downsides of democracy, an artificially induced coma. I thought that was a great piece. Yeah.
Yep.
So, first of all, what about the crypto community makes you feel that it is opinionated?
That's because in the disguise of consensus, the layer is stretched too far into curbing creative ideas that can actually be the use case of tomorrow, right? See, consensus layer, it's very important to have consensus. You have to create that. only then you can build decentralized applications. But people shouldn't get confused with dApps and the actual consensus layer. So Ethereum has actually given you a consensus layer. Now it's up to the engineers to build applications on top of it, which can actually be consumed by general public who do not care or give a dime about what is behind the scene, right? They don't care about what blockchain is, what Bitcoin is, whatever it is. So when you look at applications, it's something created for consumption. So something like any product that is created for consumption is subject to continuous iteration and change based on the market and based on how it is consumed, right? Can you imagine a product like iPhone being created by a bunch of 100 people? You simply cannot. It can only be driven by one person or something like that, right? Yeah. Your decision making can come only from one source. If you just let 100 people decide in your company, you simply cannot move, right? So the application layer of whatever sits on top of these consensus layer has to be separate. So far what's happening is everything is so intertwined that people create the blockchain and the application that sits on top of it, and everybody just decides together on what feature should come up there on the one corner and what should come up here. Let's add this feature so it's good for the trader. Like 500 people are deciding on that. How in the world do you expect to take a decision and then have a proposal? And the market moves so fast, right? You can't expect so many people to come and vote for you. And who's going to vote? Come on. That's one of the things which, nothing against these blockchains, but which has had this system, but you have to vote. What's the incentive, right? You generally there's an incentive, but it's not really something that allows people to get rewarded in a way that will make change to that product. So it has to be professionally done. You create a product. That's why we wanted to. I wrote that piece specifically to say that, okay, if at all a dApp comes that is actually going to create something and actually stands the test of time, it has to be maintained by a professional group of people, rewarded. Probably it can be rewarded by the system itself, that's fine, but the decision making has to come up from the top. It cannot be left to committees. That's one of the things which we wanted to emphasize. Even with when you create applications, you can only take the technology so far as to see the rate of consumption on what is acceptable to the society, right? You can't just put on something and say that, hey, it's blockchain, it's so valuable, you don't have custody, it's a new technology, the traders should try it and use it. Who cares? I mean, as long as he doesn't make profit, they don't care, right? So you're solving one part of the problem, but you also have to see the other side of it, that he has to make a living out of it, right? So only then it makes a real product. Or even a phone, right? Anything, any product for that matter, until it is able to replace certain things in a meaningful way, it has no right to exist. So you cannot simply adopt everything and anything and imagine that, okay, so that's the reason why we went for the trusted operator in Polkadex, where it eliminates that problem without giving custody to the central operator. So that is the first layer that we are overcoming. So imagine, I'm not saying how soon, but say, for example, quantum computing gains momentum and you can have subsequent network settlement later in the years down the line. There are people working on it. There's so much of research paper about it. It's very fascinating. You should read it. I mean, so if it comes to subsequent communication over the internet, when that happens, you just can't take out that middle layer. Or sorry, not the middle layer. I would say the layer created for the operator to hold the funds, right? Though he cannot take it out, he can actually facilitate that. That's why the TEE comes in, without giving control to the operator. He doesn't know what's going on inside it, but still you have that layer because to eliminate that problem, because that's a physical problem. That's an inherent problem with the internet, right? You simply cannot have, and that's something which stifles the growth of artificial distributed AI, right? There have been so many fascinating papers written about distributed AI. It's not able to scale because of the the scalability of the internet as is right now. You cannot make split-second communication over the internet right now. It's not possible, but it can change over time. So by doing this compromise, we're making sure that there is a product which can be consumed by the general market. So for a trader coming from NASDAQ or somebody who's traded, comfortable trading in Forex, when he comes down to use Uniswap, it's like a dinosaur sitting in front of him, right? He has to adopt so much and think of ways to make profit from it, from the volatility. And the only way these things are able to make profit, because the volatility is so large, they can actually afford to have these delays. But imagine in Forex or, basically people are playing with pips of less than, say, 0.5, 0.1%, 0.2%. And definitely we are heading in that direction at some point in crypto. Maybe, like you'll reach a point where the markets are very mature, you still have this kind of trading opportunities. So you simply cannot. You will be completely exhausted. You cannot use these systems, what the tools that we have today. So you need to try and create traditional tools which traders are used to. And that's why this compromise is okay in our opinion. I'm not saying that it should be yours. There could be a lot of mismatch in how people perceive this, but this is the reasoning behind we looked at the hybrid approach. And also to tackle the fact that, without freedom or without actually being friends with regulators, it's simply difficult to innovate. You need to leave that door open where anybody just comes in, you should be able to at least serve them a tea instead of just whacking them on the face. So you basically need to have that. It's like a moat you build for letting this thing to progress, rather than just shut it down in like an anticlimax when everybody's so thrilled about the movie, and then suddenly somebody comes and switches off the power, and then just everybody realizes, okay, we've come back to the real world now. So that's what's happening over and over again. If you look at it, there have been some very nice exchanges built, brought down, and I think they're all making a statement. Yes, they're making a statement that this is possible. Like, they're leaving a signature there. So nothing wrong with doing that. But we're trying another approach. Let's see how far it takes us. But we think there is enough innovation available in that area. I mean, enough space for innovation possible in that area. About this little thing, thing about privacy and how we should let people hold their data, and how it should be distributed with the party and stuff like that. It's just, let's see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. So, what specific arguments are happening right now in this space that are hindering innovation?
But the argument is simply about the age-old argument, which has been there since 2013, the time I came into the space, right? It's the same thing. The argument has not changed even one wee bit. It's been about money laundering and terrorism. Terrorism, money laundering. That's it. So, because these people are sitting on their throats, so banks are not able to move. They're so, they have a big stigma towards anything blockchain related, if it is, especially in the DeFi space. But I think there's been a lot of change in many of the jurisdictions, due to which, people are able to seek places to innovate rather than just be satisfied with what happens in their home country. So that's why we decided to go to Estonia, right? It's because of the same reason. I don't have the luxury of spending so much money and then finally realize that, okay, you should pack your bags. Probably bigger companies can do that, but we simply cannot afford to do that because we are basically we just started out of scratch, and so only now we have the funds to do it. But still, we had to take a safer bet for investors as well, right? the kind of investors we have, we don't have a kind of a lead investor initially, right? So we wanted to make sure their money is safe. It's not like a gamble where you one day find out, okay, you're not supposed to do it, shut it down.
Yeah.
So these kind of jurisdictions are really helpful.
Mm-hmm. How can we wake up from this artificially induced slumber? What's the solution?
I think keep moving, keep pushing, right? Every time something happens, just keep showing that these things are possible. These are all like, if you look at it, voices. I don't know if it's the right word, but it's a form of rebellion, right? From different corners of the world. Okay, so what is the cause of rebellion? Rebellion happens because of some oppression, right? You try to oppress something, just pops up from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very continuous process the world has gone through all the while whenever something like this happens, right? When people cannot get hold of the technology. Mm-hmm. It's happened with anything, right? Even with printing press, it has happened. With internet, it has happened. The guns, it has happened. Even now, people don't know what to license or not to license. There's so much of debate about it, right? Mm-hmm. It's something that we invented many, many years ago. And you even have debate about marijuana in some countries, right? So when you look at it, the world is so complex, filled with people and ideas and opinionated. They're so opinionated that there is no general rule of thumb for anything. You simply have rules for different groups of people. That's it. So that's why, especially when it comes to finance, that's why it's very difficult to control something like this, is because one day some country will say I'm going to ban it, then the next day El Salvador came, okay, I'm going to make it the national currency. It's like complete opposite things happen at the same time. So it is so fascinating and really funny if you look at the nature of people and how they behave in different circumstances. So in India, generally what happens is, it's a generally slow mover in terms of, because it's a large democracy, you have to please 100 people to take a decision. So things, so there are advantages to it. I'm not saying that, it's a crappy system. It has stood the test of time. If you look at it after independence, it's done tremendous progress only because we have a very strong constitution, right? Because it's proven, right? But the other side of it, the coin has two sides, where when it comes to something new, there is no space for them to actually allocate to sit and do something about it. It's not their priority right now, isn't it? That's why I think more developed or more technologically advanced countries will have the space and momentum to really capture that value. And one of the reasons I feel things are happening going down the hill in the US is probably they're more fragmented in terms of decision making as far as these kind of things are concerned. They I think I'm going too far. I think I shouldn't. I think it's just worrying too. It's like a protectionism, right? You're trying to protect and guard too much against the impact of whatever is actually you're bracing up against. So that's the easiest way to guard it, just block it, right? Instead of just removing the block and seeing what's coming at you and just try to see and deal with it. It's difficult. For smaller countries, it's very easy. Mm-hmm. You just convince your friend and the other friend, it's done. So they can create systems that are easier to adopt. But for them, when they have many things to lose as well, right? They're large economy and you have things to lose. You have purchasing power. You have these trade relations, which you control with your money. There's a lot of stake. So you can't really blame them. So, but these things eventually will happen. That's the sad truth. So this is just a waste of time and resource. But time, you have to give it time. There's no other way.
Yeah, that seems to cure all ills. You mentioned Juan Bennett and his formulation of his Web3 vision. First of all, who is Juan Bennett, and what is his formulation of Web3's vision? And do you agree with it?
Yeah, I think Joan Bennett, I think the one speech which I um, listened very keenly was really, really something which actually got me closer to the ecosystem that we are building right now, isn't it? So I completely believe in that vision, where I think there's a huge shift in the last 20 years into, I mean, it's a very cliche term that, okay, data is the new oil and all that. And now oil, not even, you can't even compare that right now. But still, there's a huge shift towards the value has been moving towards information age, right? You have information from people, you basically start getting info because everything started to happen on the web. And there is a huge concentration of power. So if you look at it, like if you compare that to oil industry, it's like the people who controlled the oil industry, right? They had a huge power on even they monopolized the decision making of even car companies. They actually lobbied with the government on how it should be, and that's one of those that stifles innovation. So many things. It's just very protective kind of any kind of this kind of protectionism is not very good. So that has actually taken the sheen of technological advancement that happened over the years, in the last 20 years, with the advent of social media platforms like all of these Facebook, uh, Instagram kind of things. You have a lot of data in the internet, which essentially became the most valued asset. And people who, so it's like how the Microsoft had the network effect, right? These people had the network effect of having access to this data and controlling the destiny of how and what you should do on a daily basis and what you should purchase on a daily basis and completely control your life.
Yeah,
It's
that's
happening as we speak, right?
yeah, and so
So
happening so slowly that it's like you don't notice. You just don't
you don't
notice.
notice. Yes,
Yeah.
it's simple that you have to admit that they know exactly who I am. If you ask, just call up Google and they'll tell you what kind of a person I am.
It's interesting how many videos
It's
on
a
social media that you see that are using code words to mean things that are controversial so that the algorithm isn't picking it up. And to me, that's like, okay, this is okay, we've reached a point now where that's like a critical, that's a red flag. Okay, like when people
yep,
cannot say certain words because of the AI is going to catch it. You have to use code. You have to use some other language to describe what you mean. Red flag, big red flag. Um,
absolutely
yeah, and
right.
it's very
So
frequent now that it's like almost almost every other video has like self censorship in it. Um,
yep, and that's not a big concern in this part of the world because unless you're a very aware citizen, nobody really cares here, right? Who's reading your data and okay, you just read it. Because people who are struggling, that's the difference between people in the developed world and people in the people who are just uh, coming out of um, poverty in the last many years. They're starting to get access to these tools and world is getting leveler and just becoming a flat ground now. So still there's a lot of imbalance, and that's why they have more leverage in countries um, like us, maybe I would say India, or maybe in another country. Only slowly now that they're um, but if you look at the privacy policies and the privacy, the value the system gives to privacy, it is a lot more in a country in Europe than you can compare that to a country in Asia. So they have more leverage there. These companies, corporations, so they can have most of their ways here and still tap into that data, and that's where the market is, right? So the other market is like kind of a declining market, but here, if you look at Africa and Asia, it's more of a burgeoning market. So they still end up making that entry into that system, and by the time these people realize, they would have come out of it, right? They would have actually uh, plummeted to that phase.
Hmm.
So that's why, it's very important that you build a vision and a technology to support that vision, try and create systems that will help people to have control on this kind of data they're giving out.
Another question here about Juan Bennett. He said that as engineers, we must innovate responsibly. We have the power to
Yeah.
influence the lives of a generation of people fully at the mercy of these innovations for decades to come. This is a simple question, but just to define some terms here, what does innovation mean to you?
Innovation is probably the furtherance of technology to solve the difficult problems of tomorrow. So that's what innovation means to me, at least. And so basically, when you further, because you need not be an inventor to innovate, right? You can use the inventions available as tools to innovate, right? So the tools of cryptography and tools of the basic fundamentals of blockchain has been there for a long time. So somebody had to innovate to create these systems that we have today. And I'm pretty damn sure that, if you look at the iPhone when it came out, right, the touchscreen was been there for a long time. Everybody said that, right? It's been there for a long time. So somebody had to innovate to give that experience and show people that there was a better way of using it, right? So the same way, when you are in control of innovating using the tools that allows you to remain completely anonymous and completely unidentifiable in the internet and perform transactions that can actually jeopardize the lives of people. Those are the kind of technologies which are possible today, right? So to what extent you should take that, it's in the control of the engineers that build it. So, but you can't simply say that you should not build it because there is no right in anybody. So people who are going to build it will build it. No matter you say what, they don't care. They don't care when Mostafa or Vivek is going to sit in here and babble about it. They don't care. They will build it. So it's just a general message to people, right? You have to be more responsible when you're doing these things, but at the same time, rebellious enough to show that these things has to change. It's a fine balance. It's easy to say, I may get it wrong in the future, who knows? But that's the only way you can describe it. There is technology available right now, which can actually create the equivalent of cash, which will allow things to, which there's nothing wrong with that if it is, again, so you then probably need to build technologies to, or you probably need to create checkpoints to, police it in a way, how to, again, absorb that into the system. Just like how the same analogy I spoke about earlier, right? You have the technology available to create a fire. Now it's up to us what can be done to put it off, and when it just goes out of hand, what to do to prevent it, those kind of things.
So just as a follow-up question to that, what should we be doing to be responsible about innovating in the future? Can you give us some specific examples of things we should focus on?
People may have different thinking about this, but as far as we are concerned, or I am concerned, I'm always keeping an eye on, I don't believe that these people don't exist, right? Regulations exist and legislatures exist, governments exist, people exist, okay? Your neighbor exists. So when you're aware that these things exist, then your actions will always be, will be in connect with that. You will always think of the repercussions of what you're building. And at the same time, be rebellious enough to actually do things which makes things better, So I think primarily, I think what needs to resolve is the peer-to-peer transactions. It's not even the identity, right? The middle layer itself is a fundamental thing that, there are few things that can be solved here, right? But the first problem is not even neatly solved. The peer-to-peer transaction is not even neatly solved. So when you break it down into fundamental layers of problems to be solved, you can maybe attack one thing and do it properly, and then look at how to identify, resolve the problem of identity and privacy and all of that thing. That comes in the next layer, right? At least let people transact peer-to-peer.
Mm-hmm.
We're not even able to do that properly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's solve that problem. That's my take on it, right?
Yeah.
When people challenge the way we are bringing in decentralized KYC in the order book, this is our take on it. I mean, let's first solve this properly and nicely and beautifully, and so that people think that, okay, now we have a platform that can allow us to do peer-to-peer without any custody. Now we are risk is disintegrated, no single point of failure and no single point of attack. So let that be solved. Then slowly, I think we'll catch up with the other things.
Yeah, agreed. It is, peer-to-peer is a very important concept of cryptocurrency, and that was one of the main things that I think Satoshi had in mind. So I agree with you on that. Like, let's get that problem out of the way, and then we can focus on other matters. Now you have some interesting things you said on your blog also about governance. You had a quote here from Henry Ford. As soon as they began to run their factories by committees, they went to rack and ruin. There was more debate than production. It's an interesting quote. I actually haven't heard that one before.
Okay.
In your own words, what is governance?
Governance is again a set of consensus that is arrived for decision making, right? It's a kind of consensus given. It's a second layer of consensus given to a group of people for taking decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like authority of taking a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in a consensus layer, it has paramount importance, because that determines the way the consensus layer is going to operate, how the consensus is made, how many people should agree, how we should agree, why we should agree. So how, why, and who of consensus can be done with governance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is this consensus for is up to the, that if you leave that to the committee, that's what I meant about it. It's like, it's there in the Henry Ford, I think, when he started dealing with his union in his factory, right? He felt this problem. So it's very fascinating how we dealt with it, even without any experience of getting an MBA or all of these. He just innovated on his own brain, probably with the help of his own caucus of people. But still, so it's very clear from the beginning of in this release that you cannot take decisions in large corporations or anywhere with a group of people. You can take decisions, but I mean the decision has to be related to something to do with the organization of the layer itself, right? But not about because the committee expects certain things. The expectation of a person participating in a consensus layer is to actually focus on making sure that it is secure and making sure that he's getting rewarded for that. Just do the job, and that's it. And leave to the CEO to take decisions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
CEO of the company is responsible for executing that, and he has to make the decision, right? And if freedom is not given to that person, you simply cannot build a product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's very important that as far as governance is concerned, people should understand what is the governance for. So governance is about how we should form the consensus. There's a new upgrade to the the blockchain. or anything new that to be added to the programmable layer of it, the incentive scheme to it. It's all about incentives and what affects the validators or people who are involved in securing the system. Anything connected to that, fine. But anything connected to the product itself, no. I mean, it doesn't affect him in any way. If the validator decides what button should be there on the on the interface that's connected to the blockchain, it becomes like a committee.
So
right?
for trivial matters, it's not something that should be.
It's not trivial.
Okay.
It's not trivial. It's something to do with the consumption of the product, and it has to be made. Decision has to be made really fast. If another person is making it, and another chain or another app is making it, and for consumption and you also have to imagine nowadays, I think the liquidity mining programs have evolved to a point where there is a way to derive value from the dApps that run on it, right? There's a way to derive value from the profit made by the applications that runs on top of this consensus layer. So indirectly, he's benefiting from it, right? So profit making is something which can be taken over by this dApps for distributing it to there. So these people can act as kind of shareholders as well, right? So it's a very complex way to look at it, but I think some synergy is coming through in the way. I think there's been a lot of studies regarding this. I think how to view tokens as utility or securities. So in any way this token is connected with the way the product is performing, right? Like an dApp is performing, then it becomes a security, right? So it's possible in systems which are more independent, unlike general systems like Ethereum, because there's no programming layer to enable that to happen. But if you build a custom system like that, then it becomes kind of a security where these people act as shareholders, right? Even then, as a shareholder of Apple, you don't get to decide where the button should be on Apple iPhone, right? So it should not be decentralized. The concept of decentralization, people has to clearly get in their head that, it should not be for the product, it should be for the consensus, for the data that is inside it. It should be for the data, not for the product itself, right? The actual consumption is up to the interface and how it should be done, and all of these things should be left to the people who build it.
Understood.
That's our take. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're saying that governance should be left for certain things, but for other things it's hands off. Understood. Yep. So in the beginning we were talking about how the whole idea of peer-to-peer is that it doesn't require it shouldn't have to require a third trusted party, trusted members of the community, custodians. In the beginning, that's what everybody was required someone. So what do you believe will most likely happen to the role of centralized institutions in the future?
I think up to a point, both of them have to coexist, because there's no way you can actually switch it in a day. It's not possible, because the technologies that are being built now has to consolidate over a period of time to a point of maturity before everything can transfer over. So I think things will coexist for a while. And once people feel that this is a better way to execute things, there will be a transition. And people will transition. There's no other way if this works out.
And since the whole idea of peer-to-peer is that it removes the need for trust, what is your definition of trust?
Basically, the definition of trust in this case, at least, is not to trust, right? So trust is something that you attribute to transaction, or something that you attribute a transaction with a second party. You basically have a transaction with another party, and you basically have to trust that that the transaction will go through, and it will end up well. So I don't know if I'm giving the right definition for it, but still, this is what basically we are trying to avoid here by having the network of the programmed or programmable layer taking the trust out of the system, and the two parties can avoid counterparty risk, which is there in every transaction that you do today. And most of that is taken over by the intermediaries, either in the form of institutions or in the form of financial intermediaries, escrow systems. So all of these are to avoid counterparty risk. So trust is something that you basically it's something that is agreed by both the parties in the transaction.
Got it. There are so many different kinds of decentralized exchanges on so many different blockchains, and it makes me wonder if they will continue to coexist with each other, or will they get consolidated, or will they be aggregated by some kind of a Google of DEXs or something else? What do you think is the most likely outcome?
There's no way acquisitions will happen because it's kind of decentralized. The only way you can actually bring them together is by aggregating liquidity, which I think people are already started doing it. Yeah. Liquidity aggregation is a huge thing that people are behind right now. That is to make this liquidity available cross-chain, so that a smart contract that is executed outside of Uniswap is able to actually utilize the liquidity in Uniswap. So that kind of liquidity aggregation mechanisms are already, I think, it's been currently in progress.
Okay. What phase of development right now is Polkadex?
Polkadex is in the beta phase. I would say testnet phase and audit phase. So testnet and audit is actually happening in parallel. So things we are building in a very modularized way, where you have a couple of engineers, 2 to 3 engineers working on one module and the other. So these things get ready in batches. So the first set of module, which is the primary blockchain itself and the basic necessary infrastructure needed for issuing the token and migrating, that is getting audited right now. So that is going to be ready in the first phase. So this is going as per the schedule of the audit firms. So once they are done with the first mainnet and the token migration stuff, in September, I think the IDO will go in, and then the Polka pool will go in. And so as and when they come out of audit and regular fixing of problems that are identified, because problem identification also goes parallelly, right? It's not like they finish everything and then they give you a set of problems. They just keep logging problems one by one, and our engineers start fixing it one by one, and finally, it just comes out together. So it just happens, in a few weeks. Every few weeks, it will be rolled out in the testnet first. So testnet rollout is the first thing that will happen. So we are in the testnet audit phase right now.
Okay. And what's something that makes Polkadex different from other dexes?
We'll be the only decentralized exchange that can support high frequency trading.
Interesting.
Right now.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the difference between computer engineering and software engineering?
Computer engineering includes the hardware as well, in the architecture, right? Everything right from the chip to the software. Software engineering is mostly about software. How you make these things interactive. So that's why software is mostly you have high level languages, you have system languages, where system language, someone who's actually into system language has to be a computer engineer, has to know the hardware really, really well. But once these abstraction layers are built, it's much more easier to program as a software engineer using the basic software engineering principles. But it's very difficult to program at the system level if you don't have real good knowledge of how the basic memory and how these things allocations operate. Yeah.
There are a lot of different kinds of engineering that you hear about. What is engineering in general?
Engineering is, I think, building. It's generally building together with tools, right? Building useful things for consumption using the tools. It could be bridge, it could be house, it could be anything that can be consumed, but built from raw materials. And in this case, it's software, raw materials, using a set of codes and rules. What do you put together? It's my definition. I don't know it could be, these things could be really well defined outside, but what you're reading is coming straight out of my heart with no correlation with the actual stuff that is taught in colleges. But
understood. Yeah.
That I understand from a very larger perspective.
Yeah. So building things to spec. Yeah. Yep. If you could sum up maybe the top 1, 2, or 3 core philosophies of what it means to think and be an engineer, how would you answer that?
I think as an engineer or anybody today, I think thinking is a very underrated activity these days, right? People are not really appreciated for thinking and just sitting and thinking of what's going on around you. So I think as engineers, we should be aware of what is going on around us, what the need is, and what are the problems, and what are the difficult problems out there that needs to be resolved, and thinking of the tools that are available and having an ability to actually put those tools together and imagine how things would work eventually if you have these tools, and harnessing these tools to create these products. So I think that's the basic definition of what actually I would say, that's what personally I would encourage to do. That's what personally I would encourage to do.
What advice would you give to young people who are interested in becoming engineers?
It depends on, but if you personally ask me, that is something which if I want someone to be, how you would expect an engineer to come out of it, I would really want him to be doing whatever I just mentioned right now, to see how his, how we can actually use his skills, but doesn't just come like that. Comes with actual problems that happen in his life later on. You can advise these kids as much as you want, but it simply don't work unless you go through that journey, right? Only when you stumble upon the problem, then I mentioned about the Byzantine problem earlier, right? You who cares about this, right? When you're writing a college test, but then you read about Bitcoin. Okay, this is something that sparks interest in you later on. So you just have to be open and just go out and live, and then problems will keep popping up. But just be aware that you're listening to them and you're responding to them, rather than reacting. There's a big difference, responding and reacting, right? Responding is when you're actually able to reflect on what's happening, and reacting is simply out of your subconscious mind.
I see. Yeah. So look for problems to solve.
Absolutely. I think that's the fascinating thing to do ever in life, right? Every day, if you look for problems to solve, that makes life and job very, very interesting and never boring.
Fantastic. Yep. This has been a wonderful, wonderful interview, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming, Vivek. Thanks for coming on the show today.